I ask myself the question, if Jesus would show up on earth right now in 2020, who would he hang around with? Well, I don't think he'd be hiding out in a church building. I think he'd be out in the community. And one of the things that Jesus said, he said, I didn't come for the well, I came for the sick. He was about broken, wounded, and hurting people. And I don't know a culture in our world that's broken, wounded, and hurting much more than law enforcement. And I could just see Jesus running to that culture to pull up next to them, to hold them, to hug them, to love them, to support them in what they're doing and the way that they protect and they serve. So to me, it's just trying to be an extension of what I think Jesus would do. And I think I think that's the real core of it. What's going on in the United States right now and the backlash that law enforcement officers are receiving, and it's much worse now than when you and I first connected 2 weeks ago. It's a mess in the United States right now. It's very difficult for me. Uh, I will say this: there are bad cops, but when a bad cop does something bad, you know who gets the most angry about that? The good cop. They're disgusted because that represents them. I mean, we pride ourselves on being a brotherhood and whatever, and so they would be the first ones to want a cop who does something illegal or inappropriate to be put in jail. But the reality is the number of cops that are really bad there's bad cops, and then there's cops that make bad decisions when they have to make split second decisions. And if you have never walked through that, then people might not understand that. I don't want to justify anything that any law enforcement officer has done that's wrong, inappropriate, or broken law. I want those people punished. But I do want the world to know that that does not represent the police kingdom, if you would. And I've told people, and it offends them sometimes, when I think about all the ministers I've known through 40-something years of ministry, percentage-wise, I knew more bad ministers than I've known bad cops. And so when I see them persecuted, when my guys step out of our building with their head on a swivel going 360 to make sure nobody's going to ambush them, when I see them have to remove every relic of anything that would tell somebody in the community that they're a police officer when they're off duty because they fear for their life, that angers me. When I see people on TV that say things about law enforcement that because of my 20 years experience, I know what they're saying is not true. And I would bet you $1 million they've never sat down and talked to a police officer about their life or about their job. That angers me. And statistically, when it comes to shootings and those kinds of things, the statistics do not back up what people are claiming. That's just fact. That's not opinion. The statistics do not back it up. So it's hard for me. I have pushed for greater funding for the sheriff's office for years. I get the opportunity to speak in public places to educate people about law enforcement. And one of the things that I always tell them, it's ridiculous how underpaid they are. And then when I hear people turn around and say, defund the police, it's just beyond me. To me, that's just the height of stupidity. And two, we had Antifa members running wild in the streets this week, and somebody fought back. And the first thing out of that Antifa member's mouth when he was getting taken care of, somebody called the police. Yeah, so explain that to me. And they are all that stands between us and chaos. We need them, and I guarantee you they're not doing what they do because they're getting paid a great amount of money or because they're going to get a lot of attaboys because it's a very negative world. They do it because there's some passion, there's some calling in their life to do what they do. And that's why I have great respect for them. From a faith standpoint, I really struggle with some of my brothers and sisters and some of the things that they're saying about law enforcement. I really struggle with their responses to, and these are people that I love and people that I've worked with, and I'm just like, where are you coming from with this? Do you really know what you're talking about, or are you just trying to throw out whatever itching ears out there want to hear? So that's presented a real struggle for me, to be honest with you, because I just can't believe what some people of faith, ministers in particular, are saying about law enforcement, police, and their reactions to some of the situations that we're having to deal with.
So when you hear someone um, even people from a faith background, I've heard people, who are ministers and preachers say things like this. When you hear people say something along the lines of police officers and law enforcement is a vehicle that's furthering systemic racism and things like that, how what's your reaction to that as someone who's seen, and been involved with law enforcement for so many years?
I have not seen nor heard anything with the literally hundreds of officers that I work with that would reflect any kind of racism. I just haven't seen it. So from my experience, I don't believe that. I don't believe it's true. I don't think the law enforcement is a part of the foundation of racism. I think that's a problem that's been in the United States for a long time. I don't know that it's a problem that will ever completely go away. I will say that I think racism goes all ways. It's not just one way. And I've experienced that as a minister, trying to work with people of color. It goes both ways. I think it's something we need to continue to work on. But I don't think the reaction that we're getting is justified by the facts and the realities. Now, I'll say this. I spent 10 years working with convicted felons who were drug addicts, and it was through a program that's actually offered by the courts. The judge that ran it was a friend of mine, and he allowed me to come in and bring a faith element to that recovery program. And so at one time, I knew all the judges. It was very close, was in and out of court, spent time and had to operate in that sphere. And, of course, work with the sheriff. He's an elected official. And as a side note, it awakened me how important it is to put the right people in those positions, because if the right people weren't in those positions, I would not be able to do the ministry that I've done. But I will say and own the fact that I think our judicial system and our system of justice, it's horrible, but it's the best in the world. And I think we've just got to take it where it's at and improve it. I think people, I don't think it's necessarily based on the color of your skin, but I can tell you from my experiences with my drug addicts and those that I work with, that the wealthy people are a great advantage in the judicial system. So, hey, let's make it better. I want equal justice too. I want injustice to be done away with. But I have trouble understanding how burning, looting, maiming, stealing, and killing is in any way attached to trying to establish justice.
And it's important for us, I guess, to say to people, we all agree that that racism is terrible. We agree that there's bad police officers out there. It's important for us to say that, I think, and you've admitted it yourself. Where I take offense almost, I take issue with, and I take some offense at when people, are spray painting that all cops are bad, on walls, things like that. That's where I think society has done a terrible job, and I guess the media is partly to blame for this, but of distinguishing between the occasional offender and the vast majority of good police officers. And we see so many occasions of where even if there's acts of terrorism, people come out and say say it was Islamic terrorism. People would say not all Muslims, and we all agree that this is a freak occurrence, that's and when Islamic terrorism happens, that's not how the majority of Muslims act, or nor do they support that. But we're not seeing that same level of not all police officers are bad when there's some that make terrible judgments, and when there's some that are evil and do terrible things. These are the things we need to be. I think we need to be more supportive of the everyday police officer who, whether you know it or not, is keeping you safe, and you just don't realize sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I again, I don't know how much you're able to keep up with what's going on here, but it's really hard to keep that balance right now in the midst of the narrative that is being spread.